Around the country, postal members are telling the union that they're increasingly worried about job security. They see little difference in management's command and control culture and are struggling to cope with the way change is being introduced. There's also a growing recognition that the shape and size of the postal industry is changing forever. The situation reflects the fact that in the history of the union, there has never been a more complex or difficult set of issues impacting at the same time. I've come to speak to Dave Ward, Deputy General Secretary Postal, to talk about the issues affecting the future of the postal industry. Dave Ward, Deputy General Secretary Postal, thank you so much for joining us today. There's an awful lot going on in the industry at the moment, particularly for the union. To name just a few things, you've got change in machinery, the digital age, the pension deficit, a very real and genuine problem for you all, I know. And the part privatised business of the post office has meant that you've recently written to all your members, about 120,000 of them. Clearly a very difficult time for everybody at the moment. Do you think your members are feeling the pressure?
Oh, I think without any doubt, Emma, this is probably the most difficult time that I can ever think of in over 30 years of working myself in the postal industry. It must be really tough for our members at the moment. Sometimes I think they're probably struggling to make sense of everything that's happening. It almost seems relentless, the amount of things the amount of change that's going on. But I suppose what we have to do, I mean, when we talk to our members, I can sense that they're struggling with the pace of change. Many of them, this is lifestyle change for many of them. But I also can see that there is a growing recognition that they realise that some of the circumstances we're facing mean that things can't stay the same. And I genuinely believe that if we don't find a way of changing in the right way, where our members can see a benefit of that in the longer term, then I do believe that the digital age and all of the circumstances facing us are going to pass this industry by. So there isn't a choice about change. I think the real debate and the key debate is how we change. And
that's why you wrote the letter. It's an honest letter. You said in many ways it's one of the most honest communications that you've had with your members for a long time, and they've responded accordingly, haven't they? So far, anyway, you've had some good responses. Let's have a look at some of the things that you've talked about. You started off by talking about the need for change. How have you delivered that message to them?
Well, I think we've done it through agreements. The unions recognise that we can't face away from change, so we've taken on some of the issues on modernisation, but we've done it in a way where our members can still get benefits out of that. What's crucial to us is job security. We want them to believe that they can still have long-term employment in this company. We want them to believe that they can still have good terms and conditions. Of course, we don't always see eye to eye on the how we change debate with the company.
Now, how you manage that change has put a lot of strain on your relationship with the management, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's important that our members realise that this is not about us agreeing with everything that Royal Mail do. I think it is about recognising that the circumstances that we're all facing mean that we can't stay the same. Why has it placed strain on the relationship? Well, sometimes I think the way they react as a company isn't always in the best interests of the workforce. So, for example, when we see the new chief executive getting a £142,000 bonus for just 9 months' work, and local managers receiving bonuses of £2,000 up to £2,000 each, at the same time that they've just told the workforce that their payments that were due under colleagues' share, that they're not going to get them. Well, that's not acceptable to us. I think there are signs that some of the people in the company are having their heads turned by the prospect of privatisation. So these pressures that keep getting put on our frontline members by the reaction from managers to some of the external circumstances, in our view, they're not always going about change in the right way.
No, and it's your job to protest and to protect your members and to point out to the management where you disagree with them. But it's an interesting relationship you now have with the management, because you and Moya Green, the new CEO, you have a dialogue, don't you? There is some understanding between you.
I think, in all honesty, there is a better dialogue with the new chief executive than there was with her predecessors. I think that she comes to the postal industry with, some knowledge of the industry. And obviously, if we can work things out and we can get them to accept and her to accept that perhaps sometimes her managers don't go about things in the right way, and I do believe there are signs that she can see that, then we want to build that relationship. I mean, My view on how you deal with management is if they say things and do things that are right, even sometimes if those things are difficult for our members, well then we have to be honest about that and we have to support them in that. But when they do things that are wrong, then we have to be very strong in our opposition to that, and we have to try and make them change their minds.
So we've talked a lot about change and change is coming, but what about the pace of change? You would be criticised as a union leader of trying to slow the pace of change. Do you agree with that?
I think there's a reality to the debate that nobody can get away from. The pace of change can only be dictated by what people can cope with. And it doesn't matter what machine, what button, what computer you want to press, how you want to change routes at local office, what you say about the future of mail centres. At the end of the day, it is what the workforce can cope with. And I suppose we are saying to the company, you're going too fast in a way that some people are struggling. And I think they've made mistakes. I'm not saying they're alone in that. Sometimes we make mistakes, everybody does. But I do think there's evidence out there that some of the changes that have been introduced haven't been properly planned for reasons that, whether there was a lack of training, lack of support for the people at local level, and managers perhaps under huge pressure to achieve unrealistic budgets. And then when that budget word, when the pressure comes from up above, they tend to sort of lose sight of the agreements that we've reached. They tend to lose sight of the need to engage people. And what we're saying to Royal Mail is, you go out and meet some of our members and listen and act on what they're saying. Because I do think that there's sometimes, they talk about their financial results and then all of a sudden there's a blind panic. We've got to speed up the pace of change. They're actually saying that they're not making as much progress with modernisation. Now, my view is,
blaming you for that. Is that how you feel?
I don't think they were initially. I think there are times whenever we come to disagreements on things that normally changes. I think what they're saying is that they've got to keep moving it forward. Whereas what we're saying is no, you've got to get it right. Anyone can introduce change. It's whether you introduce it in the right way. And there are examples. And we're pleased to say we had a meeting with Royal Mail the other day where we looked at a number of offices where clearly there are some lessons being learned about how you introduce change. And a lot more of that needs to go on.
I want to ask you about something that you wrote in your letter to the members. You said, it's time we all thought a bit differently about the way the job is done. What do you mean by that?
Well, I suppose the thing that's very difficult for people is that if you've done a job in the same way for many years. Yeah. If we take the delivery postal worker who goes out often on the same route, often knowing all of the customers on that route and have done it in this particular way, well, basically that's not sustainable. And rather than perhaps our members thinking that can be sustainable and getting maybe very upset, worried about that, my view is if you start to recognise that change has to happen because of all of these external circumstances, I think you're in a far better position to shape that change. I think you're in a far better position to say to the managers at local office level, well, we don't have to accept exactly the way you're trying to introduce the change. That's the agreement that we've reached. People can influence that. So the reason I'm saying that is to give them belief that they can actually still affect the way that the change is introduced in their local office. I also think that it's important that we move on to the next phase now, which is why I think the letter says, it's not about whether we need to change, it's about how we change. Because I come back to this point, that if there's anybody out there who really believes that with all of these different circumstances that we're facing, the digital age, potential of a privatised business, competition that is damaging Royal Mail. If people really believe with all of that new machinery that we can stay the same, well, they're wrong. And not only are they wrong, they're actually damaging the prospects of our members in the future. So what I want our members to do is to take a step forward, not accept everything that the company say, because the union certainly doesn't do that, but start to see how we can shape that change.
Because that change is coming.
How we need to make the adjustments in our thinking. I think if we do that, I am really convinced that there is a future in this industry.
Well, for now, thank you very much.
Thank you. This must be one of the only companies still in existence where they actually pay people to watch other people work. You know, that's not on. You can trust the workforce. The government do need to take on the historic pension deficit. It is a real problem. We've got masses of competition, but we've still held our members' terms and conditions as the benchmark for the rest of the industry.